Hello, it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I'm here to review another manga for you. This time it is the short story collection by Ryoko Kui called Seven Little Sons of the Dragon. I hope you will enjoy. Seven Little Sons of the Dragon by Ryoko Kui was originally published in Japan in the year 2012, so it is an older work by her. She is currently working on a fantasy series called Delicious in Dungeon, which I have talked about previously on my channel, and I will be making a review of that series at some point as well. But today let's focus on this collection. It has 7 short stories. Each of them is fantasy. They are either set in contemporary Japan with a fantasy twist or in historical Japan with a fantasy twist. The collection opens with a secondary world fantasy story that is inspired by an event that took place during the Warring States period of Japan. So this collection is full of different fantastical stories where Ryoko Kui gets to explore different kind of tropes in fantasy but add to them her twist. And she usually brings forth her own culture even when she is working on a sort of more Western setting. For example, Delicious in Dungeon is very much on the surface set in a medieval Europe sort of setting, but takes a lot of cues from East Asian and especially Japanese cultural heritage. And this does a similar thing. She does similar things here, where she will have a world that may be on the surface kind of Western, but when you start looking at it in more detail and you start really picking it apart, you see the Japanese influence is really at the core there, and I find it incredibly delightful. My favorite stories in this collection were The Mermaid Refuge and Wolves Don't Lie. The Mermaid Refuge is a story about a boy who discovers a mermaid and that sort of relationship. And it has a very interesting twist on sort of mermaid lore. And the Wolves Don't Lie story starts interestingly with a sort of manga inside a manga element that frames this condition of a werewolf as a chronic disease, a sort of invisible illness, if you will, and has the main character of that story deal with this idea of how they've been living with this disease and coping with it, and whether they want to take medication for it and what would that look like. And I just found it to be such an interesting, fresh take on the werewolf myth, and also I thought that it explored themes of disability and chronic illness very well, speaking as someone who has a chronic illness. At least in my view, it did that. The other stories were fine as well. I also liked My God, which deals with sort of pressures of growing up and pressures of studying. I also liked that it had supportive parents, which is really nice to see. And it deals with this idea of conservation and nature, and how nature changes and how that may not always be a bad thing, that we can also focus on what good things can come out of it. So I thought that that was an interesting story as well, and I liked the magical twist in it. The last 2 stories, in my opinion, weren't as good, so in that sense this collection kind of ended, for me at least, on a low note, because all the previous stories had been interesting with really intriguing world building, and then the last 2 stories were kind of just mediocre. They were alright, but compared to the other 5, nothing spectacular in my opinion. The art in this I thought was good, but it is much more simplified and simplistic than Ryoko Kui's work in Delicious in Dungeon. The lines are a little bit looser and kind of shaky. There isn't as much confidence in the lines. The backgrounds are also very simplified and in some cases kind of sparse. She uses a lot of like very simplified silhouettes in order to convey space. Whereas in her newer work she has put a lot more emphasis on like detailed backgrounds and such. So it's an interesting thing to see how an artist has developed when you compare her work, this older work, to her more newer stuff. So if you are someone who has read Delicious in Dungeon and then come into this, you might be a little disappointed by the art because it is a lot more simple. I didn't mind, however, because I thought that the art was very effective in telling the stories that Ryoko wanted to tell here. And it is not my favorite art style, but it still has a lot of personality, and you can still see that signature Ryoko Kui flair, especially in the way that she draws characters' faces. One interesting thing for me in this collection was the choice of putting translation notes on the end pages of the volume. So they start on the first end page and end on the last one. So that was a little bit odd for me. Like, I don't mind it, but I do think that it's a very effective use of limited space. Like, if you don't want to have like separate pages for translation notes, having them on the end pages saves up on laying out the book and saves up on paper. So I thought that was an interesting touch. There's also in the English version, there's also a poster of the wraparound art of the cover, and in the other side there are some extra bonus comics. And the translation even says that these bonus comics will be more fun if you read them after reading the whole book, which I found to be accurate. So all in all, I think that this collection is very good. I think that this collection is especially good if you are new to manga or new to Ryoko Kui's work and want to check out what it's like. And I think that this would be a very good collection to those as well who are new to manga as a format. This is a very, very accessible collection that has extensive translation notes. So even in the stories that are more heavily like invoking of Japanese culture, I think with the translation notes you should have no problem picking up on the like cultural cues. So yeah, I sincerely recommend this collection. I had a lot of fun reading it. And finally, content warnings for this book include minor instances of animal cruelty and violence. And there you have it. This has been my review of Ryoko Kui's Seven Little Sons of the Dragon. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!